57talk.com. Gary Cubetta back with you again. It's my pleasure to introduce Bruiser Jeff Costa. Costa, correct?
That's right, Costa. That's right.
Hey, Jeff, pleasure to have you with us. How you doing?
I'm happy. It's great to hear from you, Gary. It's great. All them people out there in warm Phoenix, isn't it?
Too warm, 117 degrees. It's like pure
well,
torture.
I'm here in New Hampshire, and it's like summer hasn't even started yet. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I miss my days back east. Jeff, you were telling us just before we went on air, you lost how many pounds?
92 pounds. Can you imagine that? Well, back in the early Bruiser Costa days, I probably wrestled at about 250, And when the junior heavyweight title the NWA junior heavyweight title meant something, and the champ was traveling around a little bit, you had to be about under 235. So I was actually under 235 for a little while. Of course, I was only 18, 19 when I started, so there was some maturity and thickness that came in. But anyway, to get to today, my wife entered one of these radio contests where you could become the biggest loser, not the TV show, but it was like a local thing.
Yeah.
So she got to go to this personal trainer, and she didn't win the thing. She came in second. I mean, she wasn't that big to begin with, but they do it on a percentage of body weight that you lose. That's how you win or lose the thing. But anyway, she got all this information from the personal trainer and the dietitian and all this stuff. So when she'd go, I said to her, well, tell me what you're doing, because it was working. She looks great. She looks really great. Matter of fact, Greg Valentine was up visiting, and he was like, man, your wife looks awesome. I said, hey, thanks, And I said, now I gotta lose some weight. And
so what?
What
it's
was
been
she like
doing?
3.5 months, and I don't eat any rice, no sugar, and no bread, no pasta. I have a lot of salads. I mean, I think I've had every kind of salad you can imagine.
Okay.
But yeah, it's worked, and I do 4 or 5 miles a day, and
because you were a big guy.
Yeah, I'm a big guy. I've been big and thick my whole life. So.
Yeah, and you lost 90 pounds. No breads.
No breads. No sugar at all. No sugar. My cholesterol and everything's great. My triglycerides are great. And the doctor went in, and they tested everything. They said if your back was in good shape, because they discovered I had scoliosis in my back from the time I was a kid. And can you imagine, like 2,000 matches and taking all those bumps? And I found out, when I was 46, that I had scoliosis. And they found it, and that was where the pain was coming from in my back. So I didn't even know it. But there's a curvature in my spine, and they didn't find out until last year.
Jeff, when did you start wrestling? What year?
Well, I met Killer Kowalski in '79. And then he had finished up, I'm not sure what year, but him and John Studd were doing the Executioners, and I'm pretty sure that's when Walter retired. And then he met a guy named Jack Viles, who was a local sort of small wrestling promoter, a few shows a year, fundraisers and stuff, but he was a boxing promoter. He went on to manage Ernie Shavers for a little while. But anyway, he found a space in the Salem YMCA, Salem, Mass., the town that's famous for the witches and that type of thing. And so they opened up, and Walter had these commercials on TV. So, being around that age, I was like, hey, I'm gonna be a wrestler. I'm gonna try this thing. So, as soon as I turned 18, I'd met him at the Garden. He says, hey, when you're 18, come down and we'll show you what it's all about, and if you want to do it. So I did. So basically, I was about in the first class of guys, and we had a lot of good guys like Mike Shaw, who was Bastion Booger, and Ron Shaw, who ironically went on in the WWF to be the Executioner. They threw Walter's gimmick on him because Walter was going to get TV with Bruno, so they kind of stuck it to Walter on that one. But and then Walter opened up his IWF, and
I remember when Killer was doing those small time promotions. They were kind of in competition with Vince in a very small way. Were they successful in any way?
Yeah. You know what? Walter really, really did well because he'd sell a show or promote fundraisers, but he would sell a show for like $4,500 and bring in Jay Strongbow or he'd bring in a couple of the bigger names to work the shows. But what happened in the beginning was, and I can remember back to my early days when I was doing the preliminary matches, and the old WWF guys would come in for the main event when they weren't working for McMahon Sr., as soon as they'd work Walter's shows, it was a ticket right back to New York. Putski worked for Walter in a couple shows, and then bam, he was back in New York. Jay Strongbow worked some shows, and they sold out, and boom, right back to New York. And
so they were using Killer as a way to get back into WWF.
It worked,
and it did work.
It worked because they came back to New England, and they were drawing decent houses, over 1,000 people. So I mean, it was a real indicator that they could draw.
Was Killer still in the ring? This is around the 1980.
Yeah, he was still working. He actually, it was kind of funny because he wrestled as Killer Kowalski the Destroyer, and he had his old Grand Prix belt from the Montreal territory. And he was still working. I remember the first TVs we did called Bedlam from Boston.
Right, Bedlam from Boston. I remember.
And I had to do a job for him, which of course I didn't mind. I mean, here was my mentor, and we went out and got in the ring, and he says, "Give me 2 arm drags," and I thought I was on top of the world, And of course, when you do TV, it shows up a week or 2 later on TV. And I remember my grandmother looking at it, and here I was, all of 18 years old, with Killer Kowalski, who she knew, forever. And that dirty Kowalski, look what he's doing to you. But he was the greatest, man. He was the greatest heel that ever lived, as far as I'm concerned.
Jeff, how old was he at the time?
Well, we thought he was. Let's see. Well, Walter died. He was 82 this year. Okay. This year, Walter died.
Reverse math.
So he was. If you go back to 1980, from 82 back, you'd have to figure it out. My math.
Well, he'd be about 51-ish.
Yeah.
Did he look about 51 at the time?
No, we thought he was in his 60s.
He had that look. Well, he was a vegetarian. That's
he had. That'll
always make you look old.
He had these buggy whip arms, they were really long, they almost hung down to his knees almost. And when he trained us, he actually got into the ring with us. We wrestled him day in and day out, and he took bumps and he did everything. And later, he had the school for a number of years and trained a number of different people. But after a while, he just became, sitting on the chair giving instructions, and then some of the older guys would take the students through the paces. But I was lucky enough to be able to, be in the ring and be trained by him, right on the spot every day. We trained 5 days a week, too.
Because you were one of the first in the school.
Yeah, we trained 5 days a week. And,
yeah. What'd you think of Mike Shaw at the time?
Mike, he was my roommate. We were roomies, and we had a lot of fun. I mean,
He went up to Canada, did
typical
very well.
A couple of young guys. Yeah, he actually got booked out as Klondike Mike, and that was actually during the Bedlam from Boston deal. And then for me, they were bringing in David Sammartino, and as a babyface, I could see there wasn't going to be any room for me. They had Manny Soto and Bruno. When Walter got together with Bruno on that together, they brought in a lot of WWF guys that weren't working for Vince. And I knew there was no room for me, so I ended up getting booked in Mexico City. But then I got a call from Vancouver, and they said, "Can you be here Sunday?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there." And then I just didn't come home from Canada for 10 years,
Yeah, we're going to get to that because it's very interesting. I haven't had many guys on yet who had that Canadian experience. But what role did Bruno have with the company? I remember seeing him on TV doing announcing. Was he an owner?
Yeah, Bruno and Walter each had, it was the IWF, and they basically each had their own TV. There was the Bedlam from Boston TV, and there was another one that they did out of Allentown. They might have even done it out of the Field House where McMahon had done it before. But he had Hans Schroeder, Manny Soto, Mike Masters. I know what's his name. I forget what they called him here, Rocky something or other.
Yeah.
But he was Mike Masters out in Portland, and they had a good crew. They could have done something. But
did Bruno ever get in the ring for him?
No. They used David as a top babyface, and sometimes they'd have Ivan Koloff, and they'd try to do a little bit with that. But no, Bruno didn't get in the ring.
Okay, fair enough. Now you go up to Canada.
Yeah.
And as soon as you hit the Canadian wrestling scene, what's your first impression?
Well, it was a lot more wrestling. New York was a lot of punch kick. So when I got out there was a lot of wrestling going on. So what Walter taught us was we were also very stiff. Guys like Mike Shaw and myself, we were really stiff workers because wrestling with Walter was like a friendly shoot. There wasn't really any talking. It was all, influence stuff, moving people around. So when we got out on the road, we were the stiffies from Boston,
Right.
But it was really a lot of fun. And what happened for me was I got off the plane, and Al Tomko had said to me he wanted a baby face, and he said to me, I need a heel. Can you do it? I said, yeah, I can do it. And they put me on the road for a week before I did any TV, and they called me Bulldog Tony Costa. And then I worked with Dean Ho the whole week, and Dean was great. He was like, to me, Dean Ho was as much a trainer and influence for me than Walter was. And then we got back after the first week, and we had to go in and do TV, but Bulldog Bob Brown was coming in, so they had to change me again. So I had to bleach my hair. They wanted me to bleach my hair blonde, and then I became Bruiser Costa, and that stuck.
Give me a little background as to Al Tomko. He owned, was it the Vancouver promotion?
Yeah, well, out west there was Sandor Kovacs owned Vancouver, and he sold it to Gene Kiniski, Don Owen, and Al. So basically, when I got there, Gene was still there. Don wasn't doing anything with it, and Al was still there. Well, Al was there, and the territory was pretty solid. I mean, there were some pretty good guys: Buddy Rose, Moose Morowski, Eric Froelich, Dean Ho, myself, just getting started, Terry Adonis. It was a good little territory, and I was, like I say, I was 18 going on 19, and I was there for 3 or 4 months, and then they took me aside and said, we're going to put the tag straps on you, and it was a pretty big thrill because it was the NWA International Tag Team straps, and as far as I know, Gino Hernandez and I are the youngest guys to get a strap.
So you knew Gino in what, 80, 81?
It was around 80. Yeah, 80, 81, and no, Gino was in Texas, but we were the youngest guys that they ever put over for the NWA title.
So
Gino
he
was
wasn't
19, and so was I.
He wasn't up in Canada with you.
No, he basically worked like Puerto Rico, Texas.
Okay, you threw me a curveball.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
So what was Al Tomko like? Because I remember seeing him on TV. And
he was funny to work. They do. We have like these lumberjack matches, and they'd whip him into the corner, and he'd go yip 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 yip, and then they'd throw him out of the ring, and we'd just grab a hold of him and torture him outside the ring and throw him back in. But I can't say anything bad about Al because he gave me an opportunity. I think the toughest part was around the end of the '80s, the territory was in really bad shape. And Al couldn't sell the territory to the WWF because he didn't own the TV anyways. So there was really nothing to sell, and Gene basically walked away from it with nothing. He just kind of walked away from the territory with nothing. And
but the thing I'm getting at is Al Tomko was very unique in that he was co-owner, but he was also the top. He was a top guy. He wrestled in ring. He was a manager, right?
Yeah, he pretty much did everything. He drove the ring. He drove the ring truck. He went and set up the ring with whoever the referee was. They used to go to the towns early in the ring truck, and then Al had this army gimmick that he did.
The general.
Yeah,
Al Tomko.
But he was eclipsed most of the time by the guys that were working underneath him. But. Al didn't work as hard as we did because, well, I shouldn't say that because, the guy was putting up the ring and everything, it was a lot of work. But we'd go over to Vancouver Island for 3 or 4 days, and he wouldn't go, and then, Dean Ho would take care of the business over there. And
where was the big arena you guys wrestled out of with Tomko?
The P&E Gardens in Vancouver.
And what did that seat?
I'd say about 4,000.
And how many people would be there on a typical card?
Early on, I'd say we probably did, depending on what it was. We had some pretty good sellouts. I did a hair match with Terry Adonis, and John Tolos was in the cage with Al. It was a double main, and we sold it out. I know that. And you'd be looking at, say, on an average of about 3,000.
So it was decent.
For the Vancouver show. Yeah, for that time it was decent. Then we had a small little show that we did on Saturdays. We used to do Vancouver on Monday, TV on Tuesday, and we do TV for, cover 2 weeks. And then on Saturdays we did a town which was called Cloverdale, where the racetrack was, and that was my favorite town. It was like an old, smoky hall that had, the lights that hang above it where all you could see is the ring. And it just had a lot of atmosphere, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great place. And the wrestling fans there were totally respectful. You didn't hear boring or anything like that. Canadian fans are some of the best fans to wrestle in front of because they really enjoy it. They really enjoy wrestling, and the history of it and the people that I got to meet and wrestle with out there, guys like Steve Bolus, John Tolis, Gordienko came into the dressing room one time. Just unlimited amount of people. And my wife's boss's last name was Antonesian, and if you know anything about Canadian wrestling, the Antonesians are one of the dynasties of wrestling. And it was a great experience. So, to say anything bad about Al, the advantages that I had was basically Dean Ho was looking after me. I mean, when it was time to get a raise or anything, I mean, another young guy wouldn't even know when to ask for more money. And basically, Dean took care of me. It's time to get some more money. We're doing main events. You're not doing preliminaries anymore. You got to, you got to go in and tell him you want some more money and that type of thing. So,
Hey, Jeff, did I ask you to say anything bad about Al?
No, but most people do.
you keep saying,
that's this guy. I always think of the Bagman story from Winnipeg. Wrestling's when wrestling stories are told, lots of times they're 90% myth, 10% truth. But there was the old story that the only way Al got the Vancouver territory was that he took the house money from a big Winnipeg show because Gagne couldn't wrestle in Winnipeg. Vern Gagne couldn't wrestle in Winnipeg because the commission there wouldn't allow the promoter to be a wrestler. So Al was his front man at the Winnipeg Arena. And then the old story goes that Al just took the money and left town.
And started his own promotion.
I don't know how much truth, like I say, 90%, but then the stories become myths,
Yeah.
And, I don't know how, who knows. But, he was a good guy. He used to make, he was kind of cheap. He used to make, we used to stop at this place called Betty's Truck Stop. I mean, it sounds like I'm making it up, but it was the truth. And we'd order food, and he'd just get a cup of hot water, and he'd take the little ketchup packs and squeeze them into the cup, put a little salt and pepper, and he'd say, "This is the way you do it, boys. This is how you live on the road." We'd be looking at him like, "Yeah, right, Al. You do that, man."
How was the food up there?
Oh, well, the best thing was the water. I mean, it was, believe it or not, though, it's like the cleanest water. Out of the tap, it's like today people would go for bottled water and stuff.
So the water's great and the food's hell. I've heard other people say it was who told me? Ken Wayne. Do you remember
really?
Ken?
Yeah, sometimes the food can be a little rough. I remember one time we were going through this town, and they have 100 Mile House and another town called 150 Mile House. And I mean, I've been to places where William Shatner wouldn't go to wrestle. But anyways, I asked the guy, I want to get a hamburger. It was always safe to get a hamburger. And he says, "Oh, I don't have any beef," he says, "but I got this moose that a truck driver killed, and I cut up the moose, and I'll make you a moose burger." He says, "If you don't like it, you don't have to pay for it. It's a little dry, put a lot of ketchup on it." So I said, "What the heck, I'll go for it." And it wasn't that bad. Like you said, a little dry. But
roadkill. Up there, you can eat the roadkill because it's so cold, the thing preserves itself.
Oh, yeah, it stays fresh. I mean, we went to like Whitehorse in the Yukon. We went up into Alaska. I recall telling my wife, Monday Night Football usually starts about what, like Labor Day, the season starts?
Sure, yeah.
And I remember being in a hotel with Tom Stanton, E.T. Stanton, and we were watching we must have been off on a Monday night. And we were in the hotel and we were watching the Giants and the Redskins open up Monday Night Football, and it was snowing. And we were in... God, I don't know where we were. We were in Alaska, I think. And then the sun was setting like at 11 o'clock at night or something.
You need a full ski mask over the face September 5th, right?
I think so, yeah. It was amazing. I mean, it was a lot of, like I say, it was a lot of fun, though. We had a good time. I mean.
Hey, tell me, Jeff, tell me about John Tolis at that point in his career, because he had been a huge star in Los Angeles, and then things just in wrestling didn't go well for him. What was he like at that point in his life?
Well, John's wife worked at a bank in L.A., and he had friends in Vancouver, the Antonesians that I was telling you earlier, and like Wild Bill Cody, he's an Antonesian. If you recognize that name, he used to wrestle Eric Froelich a lot in Western Canada. He was a hell of a worker. John was in great shape. Always had a tan. Very nice guy, and I think pretty much he was pretty settled in with his wife in Los Angeles. She had a good job, and Mike LaBelle's promotion, went down the toilet. And I think he just kind of, sometimes guys just lose their ambition to go out and travel some more, So he went out and did, some, and really, Roy Shire's promotion, it was gone by then too. So, there wasn't much to shoot for,
Could
He'd
you
do some Canadian shows and that type of thing.
Could you tell that he had kind of given up on his career?
No, man, he looked great. I mean, this guy looked great. He was solid, man. He was good.
Did he still do those promos where Crazy John told us, or had he toned it down?
I don't remember him doing TV.
Okay.
I don't remember him doing TV at all. He just came in for a couple of shots, but he didn't stay to do TV. He went back to L.A. They might have had a tape or something, but I don't remember seeing it. But he's a hell of a worker, yeah. He paid me the ultimate compliment when the night we did the double main, because he came back after the hair match and he said to me, "Son, that should be in Madison Square Garden." And I said, "You watched?" He said, "Yeah, I watched." He said, it was a great match. I said, "Well, thank you. It means a lot, It means a lot that you watched."
Dean Ho had been a big star in the mid-'70s in WWF, tag team champions with Tony Gurria. I remember that growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
And then he didn't do so well afterwards either, but I saw a couple matches he had up in Canada. He still looked good.
Dean was in great shape. He owned a gym in Hawaii for a while.
Okay.
And I don't know the whole story of how he got into wrestling. I don't think I ever asked him, but he was like a bodybuilder type of guy before, like guys were really cut up. But he was in really good shape. And my favorite story about Dean is I'd wrestle him every single night, and we were pretty much married to each other for a while. And, I was the green kid and he was the veteran, but he didn't take a lot of bumps, naturally, and he wanted to protect himself in case I did something stupid. But one night he said to me, he said, "Okay, Jeff, you're calling the match tonight." And then during the match, he had me pick him up and slam him. And I had never slammed him in probably, the first 10 or 15 matches that we'd had. And then I knew he trusted me, And that was a big compliment, too. And then we went on and worked a lot of different angles and things, and did a lot of tag matches and that sort of thing, too, with Ed Moretti. I don't know if you know Ed.
Moondog Moretti, yeah.
Yeah, he was involved in a lot of those. And we had some real good houses and did real well with those,
Buddy Rose, at the time, up and coming,
Mm-hmm.
looked as if it could go either way. Either he could become a big star in wrestling, or maybe because of weight issues and other things, not. How sharp was he up in Canada?
Buddy was really good. I mean, I remember Buddy doing the flip in the corner, the type of thing, people remember Ric Flair for now, but Buddy copped that from Ray Stevens, and nobody did it as good as Ray Stevens, but Buddy probably did it the next best. Then he used to do the thing where he'd catch his feet on the bottom rope and fall down where his head almost hit the floor. And he had certain things that he added to his match, and he wasn't that heavy either at the time. And he went to New York, and what happened in New York was they put him with Backlund at the Garden, but the pre-sale wasn't that high, so I'm not sure which way it went. They either added Andre or they added a Battle Royal. And if you're the Madison Square Garden main event with the champ and they have to add Andre or the Battle Royal, that's the kiss of death. That means you're not getting a rematch, So basically we were on the West Coast, we want to know how Buddy was doing. And I remember Dean telling me, I think they had to add a Battle Royal. So, because Dean was talking with Vince McMahon Sr., and they were talking about bringing me in as Buddy Rose's brother, and Dean was going to go in as Nanook of the North, because nobody had ever done an Eskimo gimmick. I think to this day no one's ever done one. But Dean could have done an Eskimo gimmick, and it would have been great,
Yeah, that would have been interesting. But I remember Buddy at the time. Buddy didn't do bad.
You have to consider, what the pre-sale was and what they were thinking.
Well, part of that was who he was wrestling, which was about the weakest champion, the WWF.
Yeah, but he did a wonderful job. If you've ever seen like him working with Pedro Morales, I mean,
Buddy or Bob Backlund?
Buddy.
I thought Buddy was good at that point.
Yeah, Buddy really, made Pedro Morales shine, unbelievably in matches with him. And, he was terrific, but...
the strikes against him were that he was a little different than what the guys in the East Coast were used to. He wasn't in steroid condition, and
well, he wasn't a punch kick man either. He was used to going 20 minutes. And a lot of the guys in Canada and the West in the Pacific Northwest, we used to work 20 to 30-minute matches. You go to New York and you're working 6 and 8-minute matches, and when you're working that short, it's hard to tell a story. You basically have to go out there and give it all up right away and kind of cut the story short and just give them all the, it's kind of like the condensed version, the Reader's Digest version when you get to New York. But when you're on the road in house shows in different places where you may have 5 matches, the territory's a little bit smaller, and you got to put in more time to give them a 2-hour show. You really learn the business. And that's what's missing today, is that the kids that go into the major promotions, they don't come from a place where they worked 5 or 6 nights a week and had to do 20-minute matches, or maybe even come back and after a 20 and do a tag, where you shoot the angle live, do a run-in, and then come back and do a tag that night. So you're looking at like 45 minutes of work, on a regular basis. 5 or 6 nights a week, you could become a pretty good worker that way.
Well, overall, I'd give Buddy Rose a big thumbs up at that point for what he had to work with. I think that.
No, I thought he was terrific.
Yeah.
I really liked Buddy. I thought he was terrific. I mean, he told me when I first met him, I said, "Buddy, will you show me how to do the thing in the corner and a couple other things?" And he said, "I'll show you all of it as long as you don't use it while I'm here." And I said, "Great, thank you." And he showed me a bunch of different stuff, and he was very helpful and a very respectful guy.
Jeff,
Great
what
guy.
happened after you left Tomco?
Well, there was a few different little outlaw promotions and that type of thing, and then basically Vancouver started, because I lived there, it started to become kind of a place where everybody tried to run. Gagne tried to run. Stu Hart came in, and Brett's manager was the guy that owned the Fox Rocks out there, and so they came in and started to run some stuff. So I basically had left Al to try to make more money working with these other people. So Moose Morawski, who was really well known, and Dean would get me booked on, with the other people, and then I'd just do shots for, wherever I could get the work. But because I wasn't on TV, I didn't care how it went because I wasn't doing their TVs. And then I'd use the leverage back with Al, and then I'd get a raise back with Al, and then the people at the TV really liked me because of the promos that I did. So they'd say, we want Costa here for the promos because they owned the show. Al didn't. And I actually had really good leverage that way. So I was primarily a Vancouver guy, and, then I was a gun for hire wherever else I went.
What kind of money could you make on a weekly basis up there?
From Al?
It's just in general.
Oh, I had some $1,500 weeks.
Oh, that's not bad.
For
the early 80s?
This was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic pay structure was like $600 in Portland, basic salary, $450 from Al, and $500 from Stu. That's basically how it broke down, when you first come in, and that's pretty much how it paid. But like I was telling you, for the hair match that I had with Adonis with Tolis on the card, I got my regular weekly pay, and I got extra pay for the hair thing, and it's like $1,500. That wasn't bad for a 20-year-old guy in 1982 or whatever it was.
Was that your best week, or were there many weeks like that? Because that sounds better than a lot of the guys were making in the U.S.
That's a lot better than the guys were making. I mean, I remember when I was talking to Mike Hegstrand when he broke in. He started there, and he was Road Warrior Hawk. And when they were working, and Ole Anderson was booking, they were driving from Atlanta to Michigan, and they were making $250 a week. That's all they were making, and I was making 3-4 times that in Vancouver.
Wow, that's surprising. I would have.
But the guys would say to me, "Why aren't you leaving? Why don't you leave?" And I was like, "Listen, if I go back to the States, I have no medical for my kids, And I got married young and had a little girl. And my wife's Canadian, so it was really advantageous for me to try to stay in Canada as much as I could so I could actually be with my family when I was off. But the thing I had was the Canadian medical. Now, I know a lot of people are critical of it, but when you're young, you're not seeing the doctor that much. But, my children were able to be born for like $12 a piece, And other wrestlers in the United States, they don't have that, They don't have that security of knowing that they've got that Canadian medical that'll take care of them.
How would you rate that Canadian medical when you were in Canada?
Well, 1 out of 10, I'd give it a 9. I mean, it was great for us. My experience with it was great. Because anytime anything happened to me, thank God it wasn't anything major. And my 2 out of my 3 girls were born there, and it was terrific.
How would you rate the U.S. healthcare now?
Well, I think we're going to be in trouble because if they schedule everything, like if they say a broken arm is $75 and this and that, the doctors are going to shy away from that, and a lot of the good doctors are just going to go more into like scientific research instead of actually being a doctor. And the price of malpractice insurance is so high now that we're just going to lose quality doctors.
So you really liked it, and I asked you this. I interviewed Johnny Powers. Do you know Johnny at all?
Never met him, no.
He wrestled in the 70s in the...
I know Greg Valentine knew him pretty good because Greg was doing... what was he doing? Johnny Fargo.
Right, with the NWF in the Cleveland Buffalo area. Anyway,
right, I think his dad was there with him at the same time.
Yeah, Johnny.
Yeah.
Johnny Powers just had his knee replaced and his hip replaced up in Canada, and it's very complicated surgery to have both done simultaneously, and I think he said it cost him something like $100, and if he had been in the United States, it would have bankrupted him, or so.
Yeah.
It's a big controversy right now. We'll get to that another time, though. But
sure,
Jeff, did you go next for a major promotion? Did you go to Stu Hart?
Well, by the time that went down, Stu sold. Stu sold like in '86.
So
Stu sold out in '86, and then Brett, Dynamite, Davey Boy, and Neidhart went to New York. So there was no Calgary wrestling after that.
So from 81-ish to 85-ish, you're in Canada. Are you just doing independent shots?
I did everything I could do, Gary. I did everything I can do because the TV was so strong coming out of BC TV. It went from Vancouver to Hamilton, Ontario. So basically, I could almost pick and choose, who and when I wanted to work. And
I got you. So Tomko had this TV running for quite some time.
Yeah, but he never took advantage of the fact, and he could have, that he had national TV though. And we used to sit there and wonder why, when the talent was there, because the talent became extremely thin after. I mean, he started a wrestling school, and then he started having a bunch of girls wrestle, and he even started a girls promotion. That's pretty much where I drew the line. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Who did he have? Because I saw him. I lived in Connecticut, and around '85, I had the satellite dish, the big C-band dish, and I remember seeing your promotion, Vern Siebert. Well,
Vern was a referee for Rocky Della Sera, Bob's brother, Bob Della Sera, the UFO.
But my question is, who was TSN? Was he on TSN? What was the national TV that Tomko had?
CTV.
What?
CTV.
CTV. That's what it is.
It was taped out of BCTV, British Columbia Television, but it was on every Saturday twice. It was on the local show on BCTV, like at 11 in the morning, I'll say. But then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was on the national channel.
Because C-band had one satellite that was just Canadian. You had CBC, CTV.
Yeah, CTV was the national network. So even today, I get autograph requests from people that remember me as Bruiser Costa, and they'll send photos or something. And I've had people from the Maritimes and all over. They remember. So it's really flattering when they remember.
Sure. And Tomko has national television in Canada, a little bit in the United States with C-band, but that's really not relevant. So you guys are wondering, why isn't he taking advantage of it and promoting?
Well, we used to sit there and wonder, why we're not moving it someplace, moving into different areas, particularly when there was no Stampede Wrestling anymore. Why weren't we going to Alberta, Well, why wasn't he hiring, like Bad News Allen and some of these other guys,
Did anybody
didn't go to New York, but he didn't do it. He didn't do it.
Did anybody try and talk to Al? Hey, Al, look, you're on national TV. You could make yourself some money here.
Well, I think Morawski and a few of these guys brought it up more than once, and
was he the kind of guy you could talk with? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I used to get a lot. I had an invisible manager at one point. I had a $3,000 shirt. I mean, I used to come up with a lot of stuff for myself to stay fresh, you know. Like every once in a while, I'd just take a couple months off or whatever to be off of, just to, you know, put some space in between and come back with something new. And he was always open to stuff that I would come up with. I had a $3,000 shirt, which was a Hawaiian shirt I got for 50 cents at a Salvation Army. And I had my invisible manager, Leo, and I used to sell 8x10s of a picture of the shower of the PNE with nobody in it. And I used to sell them for $1 a pop. I used to get a kick out of that. And, yeah, it's just sometimes Al would start an angle or something and he'd just kill it a week after, you know. And we used to get kind of mad over that because, you know, we think things would take off. Or if something got real hot, he'd just throw himself into it, you know. And
was he a wealthy man?
He had a nice house. There's a ranch house down in Blaine, Washington. And I wouldn't say he was wealthy. I'd say, you know, he was upper middle class, you know. Upper middle class. His wife was nice. He had a daughter that worked for immigration. So they lived close to the border. They lived on the Washington side. They didn't live in Canada. And he had two sons that eventually wrestled, Todd and Terry. Todd was Rick Davis, and I think Terry was the Frog or something because he had an accident where his voice sounded like a frog. But neither one of them really did anything. But the oldest one, Todd, he didn't really want to do it. He did a lot of refereeing and things like that. But both good kids, you know, nice kids. And
who was the TV commentator for Tomko?
Well, there was two different guys that I remember. The first guy was Ron something or other, and then they used to do the match of the week, and then Moose Morowski twisted his neck into a bow, and then the guy didn't want to do it anymore. And then they had Ed Carl, another guy who his day job was for something called Johnston's Electric or something. He was a nice guy, but he didn't know too much about wrestling, so we really couldn't depend on the announcer to, you know, make sure that they told him what our finish moves were and set up things, and, you know. So if we got interviews, we had to really make sure that we promoted what we were doing really hard. And then I can't remember what year it was, but the station came to us and said, we don't want the wrestlers on the interviews to say what town they're going to be in because this goes out nationally. The show's a national show. So we had to do like generic interviews, like, you know, Dean Ho, I'm coming to get you, whatever. We've got a big match coming up. We couldn't say what town it was. We couldn't say what day it was. And then what they would put up what's called a V4, which is just, you know, the lineup, you know, what town we're coming to. And so that changed a little bit because it was a lot more fun when we'd say Saturday night in Cloverdale or whatever. It's going to be me and you. And, you know, we could actually get right down to the nuts and bolts of the thing to try to talk the people into the building. But after a while, the station, another thing that was weird was that we had to deal with there was there had to be Canadian content on the show. Any show produced in Canada has to have Canadian content. So Canadian content at the time was Canadian wrestlers. Guys had to have a certain percentage of Canadian wrestlers on the show.
It's the same with like the Canadian Football League. They require a certain amount of the players on each team to be from Canada.
Yeah.
So it's like a national rule.
Yeah.
So how did that apply to wrestling?
I don't know how it applied in numbers, but I know when I became a landed immigrant of Canada to get it, you know, I have not dual citizenship. My kids have that, but I have like landed status. Like my wife here has a green card; she's not a citizen, and then I have it in Canada. But they could use me as Canadian content then, which was good, you know. But yeah, you had to have a certain amount of Canadians on the show, and it had to be more than one. That's for sure. I think the majority had to be Canadian.
Were you
and
there
I think a lot of that's still the same, too. I mean,
it is,
Canadian football and...
well, they protect the people, you know, within the country so that they have jobs, actually get to work, unlike what's happening in the United States.
Unlike us is right. So, yeah, there's a lot of good things in Canada. And, you know, I mean, the sad part is they have so many taxes. Like if you go buy a Twinkie or something like that and it's $1, you end up paying $1.55 or something by the time the taxes are done on it.
Do the Canadian people like Americans overall, or so-so?
Yeah, oh my God, Canadians love Americans. 90% of Canadians would want to be Americans. I can almost guarantee you that. Well, of course, that's from being in most of the border cities. You know, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver's a really American city. You know, it's like the LA of Canada. So They're always doing movies, and it's a great place. I love it.
Jeff,
My oldest daughter still lives there. She moved back and went to school because as a Canadian, she was born Canadian. She was able to go to college there at a very affordable price. And then my middle daughter just graduated here, so we're doing good.
Jeff, were you there for the dying days of Tomko's promotion?
No, I left. John Tenta came in, Earthquake or whatever, and I was the champ. I think it was the Canadian title, and he wanted me to lose it on TV, but I had already given my notice when I was leaving. And I said, Al, I've been around here for a long time. I said, I'm not going to do the job on TV. I'll do it tomorrow night in Cloverdale. And he said, no, I want you to do it on TV. I said, no, I ain't going to do it on TV. I said, I've been here for a long time, I don't want to do it in a TV match. So he said, all right, forget it. And I didn't even work the last show. He said they took the strap and said that I was in the bug house again or something. But I didn't want to do it on TV because I knew at that time doing the job on TV meant a lot. And it's different from today.
Well, because the whole country'd see it.
Yeah, and I just didn't, I didn't want to do it.
You're making good money up there in Canada.
Absolutely.
And
I knew that there would always be an opening to come back. If it wasn't for Al, it could be somebody else. And if I did the job, I just didn't want to do it. It was the first time I ever didn't want to do it.
Was he upset with you?
Yeah, he wasn't real happy with that because he really wanted to put Tenta over. He had just come from Japan and he was doing a sumo thing, and he lived in Vancouver, and that was his first pro wrestling thing after I think Inoki trained him. He worked a little bit for Inoki, and then he came home, and this was going to be his first big thing on TV was to knock off me for the championship. And of course, I said I didn't want to do it. I was leaving anyways, but I didn't want to do it. I said I'd do it, on a live show without it being on TV. That wasn't a problem. The live show I would have had no problem doing it. I just didn't want to, do it on TV. You can understand that, can't you?
Me?
Yeah.
I think you did the right thing.
Yeah, I think so too. It kind of bothered me for a while. I thought, geez, I'm not that big-headed. I don't think my hat size is that big, but he kind of accused me of that. Like, who do you think you are? And I said, well, I don't do it
hell
tomorrow.
With it, because it's going to kill your earning power, and they tell you they're going to do a return favor for you, but
no, and those return favors never come back.
That's a kiss of death when they tell you they're
working for a promise. They call it.
Yeah, working for a promise and a kick in the ass.
That's right.
Hey, so what do you do next?
Well, when I left, almost 10 years, whatever, and then I came back here to New Hampshire. And I met some guys, and they wanted to be wrestlers. And I thought, well, I could train you. And a friend of mine built me a ring, and I got a warehouse space, and I started training some guys. And I said, well, I'll have a show. So I put a show together, and I basically trained the guys in that style, the Canadian Western Canada type style. And it really is a style. And I remember people would see ECW, and they'd say, that's hardcore. And I mean, it wasn't hardcore. Nobody used light bulbs or anything like that, but as far as, guys having wild, bloody matches, that was every night out there, in the Wild Wild West. That's how you wrestled. And so, yeah, it just kind of snowballed and got bigger and bigger, and then around 95 or 6, I invented this Lobster Man character.
Yeah, now what's the story? Tell me about this, because I've heard about this for a long time, but I don't want to seem a little...
No.
I don't really understand what the point was.
Well, I needed something that would bring people to independent wrestling because the guys that I was using on the shows, nobody knew who they were. And I said, well, I was joking with Kevin Hughes, my buddy, who, wrestled for a number of years and used to be Anton Leone's partner at the pizza place down in Long Beach. And I said, I'm going to be a 300-pound lobster man. He said, no, you're not. So one of my wife's friends made these big mitten-type things, and I just ordered a pair of gear with a lobster logo on it, and that's all it was, these hand things and a logo. But the mind of the people built it up into something else, and all it was Bruiser Costa with these hand things on and a little logo of a lobster. And people would say, how can you wrestle like that? I'd say, I don't. I take them off. It's just a prop to wear to the ring. And I had like a cape too with the with the logo on it. And then I think it was 1996 '96 and the election was in '98, I ran for president, and then everybody picked it up because I'm in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire's always first in the primary. So there was a lot of media people just hanging around, waiting to see who was going to announce their candidacy. So I announced mine, and they all just jumped on it. And then we went to all the places that the candidates, have meetings, like the Red Arrow Diner and these places, and it was a real novelty. So we actually went and got me on the ballot too.
You were a Republican, right?
I was a crustacean.
Yeah, but what you have to register as either Republican or you did Independent.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
No, you know what? I think I actually registered as a Republican.
Ah, see, I know and you don't. So I remember '96. Steve Forbes was running. Bob Dole. This is '96, right?
Yeah, there was. Well, they had the primary anyways, and they told me that I ended up getting more votes than Alan Keyes and somebody else.
That's
I
not
forget
bad.
who it was,
That's a.
But as far as the rest of the country went, I mean,
that was a disaster.
Yeah, because I'm not going to go spend a whole bunch of money to travel around knowing that it's not going to go anywhere. But there was a couple documentaries made, one by PBS, I'm on the ballot, and then I did The Daily Show a couple of times. Then they did the best of The Daily Show, the best 50 episodes, and I was in the top 10 for that. So that was a lot of cool stuff, and it was really fun. It was a good time. And so now I'm like, if I do anything, it's Bruiser Costa, a.k.a. Lobster Man. So, but I kind of got stuck with the Lobster Man thing. It's kind of silly, but we did a lot of crazy stuff. Like I had Dinks the wrestling goat. This friend of mine went to a fair, and some guy says, "I have a wrestling goat." He says, "Geez, let me get your number, and I'll tell Jeff." The guy called me up. He says, "Hey, this guy says he's got a wrestling goat." I says, "Great, let's get it." I said, "What does it do?" He goes, "I don't know." I said, "Well, let's put it on the show. We'll put it out in the ring with the farmer during intermission." I said, if the people don't like it, well, they're up getting popcorn and stuff anyways, So we put the goat in the ring, and the goat doesn't want to do anything with the farmer. And then all of a sudden the goat takes a crap right in the middle of the ring.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and then he jumps out of the ring and runs towards the ring announcer, and the ring announcer's screaming, "He's loose, he's loose." Oh, my God, it was funny.
There wasn't much of an independent wrestling promotion or promotions in the East Coast in the 70s and the 80s because Vince Sr. pretty well monopolized things. But then as Vince Jr. took over and went national, there became a lot of independent promotions.
Yeah, there was a lot of vacancies because the high schools hadn't started their nonviolence in the schools type policies, and there was a lot of little places. Well, Jack Witchy's had burned down, and that was one of the big wrestling places in North Attleboro, Mass. I think they had wrestling there every week. The Frolics at Salisbury Beach, McMahon ran that. And
there were promoters all over the place popping up. Do you remember Century Wrestling Alliance?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
I think they owned car dealerships and they got into promoting wrestling.
Oh my God, there's probably 30 or 40 of them right now, but I mean some of them are so bad that it's really funny. The kid I'm training now, he was just in WWF. I was working with him last night because he's getting ready to go to Japan. And what's his name, last name? Antonio the Promise Thomas. He was in, I forget what his gimmick was in WWF, but that was his name. And he's a real good kid. But he was telling me, like, how the TVs and stuff work now. And he says they've got, like, 4 minutes to get, do their intro is considered one segment, and then when they get in the ring, it's considered another segment and all this stuff. I said, wow, that's a big difference.
Jeff, in the early 90s, did you see Killer again?
Yeah, we did. Oh, yeah.
Here's what I want to ask you. John Studd at the time, sick with cancer, but he was still working. Did you ever see him near his final days? I always wondered what kind of shape he was in.
No, I never did.
Did you hear anything?
I met his family.
Yeah.
I went with Greg Valentine when Greg was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, he brought me, my friend Ripper, and his wife Julie as his family. So I had a good time. I we went to all the different things, and I met Stud's son and his wife and I think his daughter. And I told his son, I said, hey, your father was a real good guy because when I went to Montreal, we didn't know anybody and everybody spoke French, and they kind of kayfabe you the whole time speaking French. If you don't speak French, it was difficult. But John was there, and he welcomed us like a brother, because we were all Kowalski guys. And I said, your father was a great guy, and he treated me real good because I worked with him, 4 or 5 times up there, and He was just a really, really good guy. But no, I didn't see him when he was sick at all.
Do you miss wrestling? Being in the ring yourself?
Yeah, terribly. I mean, I really, really had fun. I mean, I can't tell you. It was just fun. It was something I wanted to do when I was a kid, and I managed to live the dream that I wanted to, and it's a lot of fun. So, but I still stay involved, and
what was the best?
I like helping the kids that want help.
What was the best part about being a wrestler, and what was the worst part about being a wrestler? Day to day.
The best part was just living the life, The worst part of it was just some of the road trips were just brutal. The driving long trips, on bad roads. I mean, that was hard sometimes, But even that, you kind of romanticize about it now that it's over, and it was like, that you had fun, and it's hard to say there was something bad about it now,
Who do you keep in touch with?
Well, my friend Kevin Hughes, who I've known since I first broke in, and I talk to Greg Valentine, at least once a month because we're big baseball fans. He lives down in Tampa, so what I used to do is I like the Red Sox because I'm in New England. So I could fly down to his place and stay with him, and we could go to the Tin Can in Tampa and get good seats cheap. And he was working a thing down there with Gene Okerlund and his brother-in-law Brian Knobs and a bunch of other guys who were a Beefcake, and they were doing like legend shows on the baseball field after the game. So they had a pretty cool thing going down there, and so he's always good. And whenever he works in New England, he comes up and stays up here, and we have a lot of fun.
What kind of shape is Greg in these days? Because I've seen him, and he looks like he's, it's taken its toll.
Greg still really works out a lot. I mean, he's never worn knee pads, and he's incredibly strong because I go to the gym with him when he's here.
Oh, wow, okay.
And his biceps are absolutely huge. And but I mean, I'm not sure how. Let's see. Greg must be 60 this year.
And he's worked consistently for 30, maybe 40 years, almost 40 years.
Yeah, that would be the best book. I mean, I spent about 5 years on the road with him, and I mean, if he writes his book, it's going to be a great book. He needs somebody to collaborate with and just put the stories down because he's got them all from, L.A. to breaking in with the Sheik, sleeping in the Sheik's basement, being the valet for Don Fargo, spraying the spritzer and all that stuff. I mean, he's had an amazing, amazing career, and the knowledge that he has is, WWE brought him in for a while as a troubleshooter trainer, and they really didn't know what they had because he's got a wealth of knowledge that people just don't have, because he's been through so many eras of wrestling, and besides that, his dad was, who he was, Johnny Valentine.
The great Johnny Valentine. Jeff, how's your life today?
How's my life?
Yeah.
It's great. I'm having a good time. I mean, like I say, I lost a lot of weight. I'm getting back down to Bruiser Costa size instead of Lobster Man, and I have a couple of good girls that I'm training and a couple of good guys. And some of the guys that are, bigger names or whatever will come to me and have me teach them how to, be a heel or whatever. And it's fun, I'm having fun. And that's just what I just want to have, a good time and keep it nice and easy. And I have some fundraisers that I do in a building here in Plymouth, New Hampshire. And it's for, it's like an old age home, to tell you the truth. But, as long as the people keep coming, and I'll still be putting it out there.
Cauliflower Alley Club. How long you been a member?
Oh God, it's been a long time now. Maybe 10, 15 years or something. I never went to the ones in L.A. My buddy Kevin used to go with Anton Leone. They used to do it at the Spaghetti Factory, right in L.A. And yeah, it might have been 10 years or so in the Cauliflower Alley. I only went to Vegas one time though. It was a lot of fun. I'm planning on going this year. Somebody said Dean Ho might get one of the awards. So if Dean's there, I'm there. And Dean said if I'm there, he's there. So that'll be a great reunion.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's like my dad,
Yep.
I mean, I'd love to see him. He sent me a nice Christmas card this year, and I hadn't heard from him in years. And he just wrote a big long letter, and Yeah, it's an important thing, you know.
Hey, you know what's funny, Jeff? Your dog's barking, and our dogs here are barking. So
everybody hears the dog.
That's funny. Okay, we're going to close, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, Gary, I had a great time, and I hope the listeners, they can check out lobstermancosta.com if they want to know a little bit more. And if they get a chance to see Greg Valentine out there, go see Greg, get his autograph. He's a great guy. And Gary, stay safe, buddy.
Hey, Jeff, don't hang up. I want to talk to you for just a minute, okay?
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Don't hang up.